Hi everyone and welcome to this video on the basic principles of thematic analysis. In this video, first we are going to talk just a bit about qualitative and quantitative research and methods, just to understand better how all of this works. Then we are going to see the basic principles of thematic analysis and the different steps to do thematic analysis. And I will also give you a list with the different tools for MaxQda that can help you for each one of the steps. And in the end, we will talk a bit more about the analysis process and the importance of having both the right tools and the right data for your project. If you are not familiar with MaxQda, which is a software for qualitative and mixed method analysis, there is also an introductory video to MaxQda on my website, my YouTube channel, and on the training platform where all my courses are. So before we talk about thematic analysis, I want to start with a few words on qualitative versus quantitative research, because well, it's important and it's something that can stir up a lot of debate. And maybe you noticed that some people can have quite strong opinions about this. So I would suggest that we take a step back and that we consider how both qualitative and quantitative research can be useful and even how they can be complementary. So one important thing to remember, and I'm going to repeat this quite often, and it's that what makes a research robust or not, it's not the method. It's how the method have been used by the people doing the research to answer their questions. So it means that we don't have to set one method against the other. And most of the time when we are doing research, we use both methods and it tends to make the research better. So both qualitative and quantitative approaches can produce good and bad research, very good or very bad research even, depending on how they are used. And for this, the research questions are important, really important, to decide what kind of approach and methods and tools you better use for your project. This being said, it's important to be aware that there are different types of data and different types of tools and methods. And for me, this is where the distinction between qualitative and quantitative makes more sense, and it's what we need to pay attention to. So we can have qualitative and quantitative data, like numbers and statistics, and like text-based information. There is also audiovisual data, like images, audios, and videos. And we can have also different tools and methods that we usually describe as qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods, which is mixing both. In MaxQda, when we talk about mixed methods, it's adding variables to qualitative data, like adding the age, location, gender of the people in your interviews. And you can mix this and use different tools on different data. For example, if you have, let's say, 20 interviews, you can do some statistics, like using a quantitative tool and counting the words in your interviews, for example, without even reading them. With the same interviews, you can also analyze the meaning with qualitative tools and analysis, like thematic analysis, for example. And you can mix both. You can do a qualitative analysis of the interviews and some descriptive statistics with the characteristics of the participants, like age, location, and so on. Another example, if you use data from pictures, you can describe what's on the pictures, something close to qualitative thematic analysis on pictures, or you can count the coverage of the different things represented on the picture. So you can use both qualitative and quantitative tools on these images too. My point is that we don't have to set qualitative and quantitative research one against the other. We don't even have to choose just one. So sure, there are qualitative and quantitative data and tools, of course, and it's important to know that. But all of this is much more flexible than we usually think, and we can do a lot more with our data by combining methods when we need to. So I repeat this because it's important and it leads to the next point. What makes a research robust or not, it's not the method itself, it's how the method have been used by the people doing the research to answer the specific questions. So let's talk about these questions now and how the research questions actually influence the type of data and tool we could use. So one useful thing to remember is that typically quantitative and qualitative data and methods answer different questions. Quantitative data and analysis usually help with questions starting with how many, when, where, what kind. And qualitative data and analysis help with questions starting with why and how. So it means that it's important to use the right tool and the right data to answer the right research question. If you want everyday life example about the right fit between the tool and data, let's say you want to build a shelf to put your books on. So you want to build a shelf using planks of wood. So you have your wood planks. But now to build it, if you have only nails to fix your planks together and only a screwdriver as a tool, well, you're in trouble. And it's the same if you have only screws to put your planks together and only a hammer as a tool. So see, you need the right combination of data and tools for your goal. And I often talk about research questions because they are incredibly important and in the end, qualitative and quantitative research are usually complementary. For example, let's say you are doing a project on immigration. By using a combination of questions and data, you could answer questions like how many people are living here, how old they are, what gender, when did they move here. And you can also answer questions like why did they move here and how did they end up living here. So just remember two things from these few words on qualitative versus quantitative. First, both qualitative and quantitative data and tools are useful and they can be complementary. And second, the most important thing is to have a combination of the right data and tools for your research questions. So let's talk about thematic analysis now. A thematic analysis is the main qualitative analysis method or tool, and it's also the main use for a software like MaxQda. You can do a lot of other things with MaxQda, but this is what most people use it for. So I think it's important to talk a bit about thematic analysis when learning about how to use MaxQda. So here are two definitions of thematic analysis that I like a lot. And the thing to remember is that thematic analysis is to look at a pattern, to identify patterns of meaning on your data to answer research questions. And it's not just about summarizing data. It's about interpreting and making sense of it. So let's see the steps of thematic analysis now. We're going to review the different steps of thematic analysis. The steps I'm talking about are the usual steps of thematic analysis as they have been developed and described by Brown and Clark. And this image here shows how thematic analysis works. You can see that the steps are like stairs, like a staircase. So every step is built on the previous one, and you need to step on the previous one to climb on the next one. So you need each step to be strong enough before moving to the next one. So we're going to see the steps one by one. So step 0, it's like the foundation before the analysis. The goal here is to have the research ready for the analysis. So it's the research design, the planning, the collecting data, organizing data, and so on. At the end of this stage, your data should be on your computer, ready to be imported into your software. So if you are using a software like MaxQda, this is usually when you are going to start using it at the end of this step. Step 1 is familiarizing yourself with the data. And the goal here is to get to know your data. So here you have to read all of your documents at least once with an active reading. I mean, you can read fast, but still an active reading. So it means taking notes about your ideas and highlighting interesting things in your documents and so on. And at the end of this step, you should have a first list of ideas and leads about what's interesting in your data. And if you are the one doing the transcriptions for your interviews and focus groups, it's a good way to familiarize yourself with the data. Step 2 is about developing categories and codes for your analysis. So the goal is to develop a first coding grid as a starting point for your analysis. And here I want to take a minute to talk about what is a code and what is a category or a theme. A code is like a label with a short description of what is interesting in an extract of your data. So when you are coding, you kind of stick a label on an extract, meaning this extract is interesting because it's talking about this or that. Your code being just this or that, not the full sentence, of course, but you get the idea. Categories or themes now are not exactly the same as codes. It's more like a group of codes with a general theme connecting them together. For example, you can have codes called parents, siblings, friends, grandparents, all in a category called relationships. Some people call that categories, others call that themes. It's pretty much the same thing. But the difference between codes and categories can be a bit confusing because in softwares like MaxQda, the categories and the codes look the same. So just remember that a code is like a label you stick on an extract of your data, and a category is like a big label for a group of codes that make sense together. I also want to take a minute to talk about deductive and inductive reasoning and coding. So you probably know that you can combine both in your research. So in a practical way, it means that you can start by building a first list of codes and categories based on what you expect to find in your data. And your expectations can be based on a theory, on your hypothesis, on previous research. And that first list is going to be a starting point for your research. So building that first list, this is the deductive approach. And this is exactly what is happening at this step. You are building that first list. And then when coding, so in the next step, you can develop new codes and categories as part of an inductive approach if you find new interesting things when coding. So step 3 is the basic coding of your documents. And the goal here is to code all your documents one first time, and also to improve your coding system by adding new codes with an inductive approach, as I was saying. So you are going to delve into the content of your documents, reading them again, and this time coding them. So this is the first row of coding. This is why it's called basic coding. You can, of course, keep improving your coding in the next steps. So you're going to code your documents using the codes from your list, so the deductive approach from the step before, and you are also going to add new codes when you find new interesting things, new topics, and that can be turned into codes. So this is the inductive part. And just a few useful tips about coding. When coding at this stage, it's not about interpretation. It's more like highlighting interesting things in your documents and putting labels to them. But if you do have ideas, and you're probably going to have ideas, I hope you do, you should definitely write them down at this stage. Also, you want to code anything that you think could be interesting. Even if you're not sure if you think it could be interesting, then you should definitely code it. Because it's easier to delete a code that you think is not useful than to go back into your data and having to read the whole thing again because you missed something. Another tip is you don't need to code every piece of text. I mean, not everything has to be interesting in your document, and it's perfectly normal. Another one, you can code an extract with more than one code, because an extract can be interesting for more than one reason, more than one topic. And the last one, it's absolutely okay to change your mind about the code, to change its name, to group some codes, whatever you have to do to improve your codes and categories. Step 4 is developing your category system and fine coding. So the goal here is to check if your codes and categories make sense and to improve your coding and categories. You're going to be looking at your data again and to go back and forth between your code list and your data. So you're looking for more patterns, more ideas, and how to improve the organization of your codes and categories. And here you can add new categories and codes, maybe remove some of them, merge some of them if they are too light, and split others if they are too big, and so on. So here again, just a tip, you have to check your categories at 2 levels. At the level of the coded extract. So the extracts coded with the same category or the same code, it should make sense to group them together. There should be a logic to it. And you should also check your categories at the level of the whole project. One category should be different than the other's categories. One category should be different than the other categories. There should be a clear differentiation between your categories. Step 5 is the analysis. So it's about what is your data telling you. At this stage, the goal is to do the interpretation work. And it's here that you can combine your results with other types of analysis and tools, like quantitative or mixed methods, if you used some other methods. And at this step, you really dig into your data and categories and try to answer your research questions. And analysis like this is also best understood as some steps. I'm going to show you on the next slide. Here, this is a good image of the analysis process. You see it's also in the form of steps, like a staircase, so it means you have to go step by step and to build on the previous step. And the goal is kind to go as far as you can go on that scale with the data available to you and the knowledge you have. So not every research project can climb to the next step. And you see at one end, here at the beginning, you have exploratory analysis. So it's ready, is there data available, is it usable for the project, and so on. Then you have descriptive analysis, which is answering the questions who, what, where, when, how many. And we've seen that these questions are usually the questions we can answer with basic quantitative data and analysis. Then you can reach the next analytic level with more explanations and answering questions like why and how come. And we've seen that these questions are better answered by qualitative data and analysis. And after that, there is a level of interpretation, answering questions like what does it mean? What else could it mean? And why is this important? And from this level on, the knowledge of the researcher is important to make sense of the results in their context, to bring some insights and so on. The top level here is usually the more challenging. This is about predicting what could happen next and make suggestions to improve the situation. So if your project, data and knowledge allow you to go this far, you should definitely try. But it's not something that can be done in every research project. So if we go back to the steps of thematic analysis, because the analysis process here, this image, it's not just for thematic analysis. But now we go back to thematic analysis to see the last step. The last step is about writing your research results, your conclusions and your reports. So it's to write the story of your data. And this is out of the scope of this video, so I'm not going to talk about it now. So the question is now, how can MaxQda help you with all of this? And you see here, for every step of thematic analysis, here in blue, there are also tools here in the orange boxes, tools from MaxQda that can help you and can be useful at the different steps. So I'm not going to talk about all of this in detail now, because this is also out of the scope of this video, but at least you know which tool can be useful at the different steps, and you can find out more about them later when you need them. So now that we've seen how thematic analysis works, as a conclusion, I want to go back to the importance of having a combination of the right tools and data. And I want to talk a bit more about how MaxQda can help you in the analysis process. So if we go back to the analysis process, here, climbing the steps of this process, whether it's with thematic analysis or something else, it's about having both the right data and the right tool for your question, and of course knowing how to use the tool. And this is especially true for this step here between 2 and 3. It's usually a really important step in social science and not always an easy one. And in my opinion, using a tool like MaxQda can help you a lot here between these steps. For other steps too, but I think it's especially useful here. But using a tool like MaxQda can help you a lot, but only if you have the right data. So let's talk a bit more about data. So we've seen that different kind of data can answer different kind of questions. And here you see this is especially important to climb from step 2 to 3, because you need to go from questions, descriptive questions like who, what, where, when, how many, to the next question, why, how come, which are more explanatory. And we've seen that typically quantitative and qualitative data and methods answer different questions. So quantitative data and analysis can really help with questions starting like this: who, what, where, when, and so on. So typical questions from step 2. And qualitative data and analysis can help with questions starting with why and how. So here, more typical questions from step 3. So for example, let's say that you are doing a research project on immigration. If you only ask people, where do you live and since when, you can answer the where and when from step 2, of course, and the how many people live where. But now if you want to know why they live here and how they ended up living here, you have to ask questions to make them talk about their experience. So you have to ask more complex questions, open questions, to encourage them to talk and learn more about them. So for step 2, you may use short survey and close-ended questions, but to be able to go to step 3, you need qualitative data and real open questions, where people can talk about their experiences, take the time to explain. So not just short, quick questions or closed question. So my point is that it means that you really have to think about your data from the start, from the beginning of your project. So my advice is start with your research questions and take some time to think about what kind of data you actually need to answer them. That's a big step in the beginning, and it's going to make everything else in the process easier. Because you may have the right tools and you may know how to use them perfectly, but if you don't have the right data, this is not going to work well. So enough about the data, let's talk about the tool now. So once you have your data, now how does it work? I mean in MaxQda, to go from step 2 to 3, how does it work? A lot of tools from MaxQda can help you to answer the questions from step 2. You can even use mixed methods and variables to get results like, for example, 2/3 of the people talking about this topic are female and only 1/3 is male. So when you are able to say that, to write that in your report, you have reached step 2 in your analysis. Now, MaxQda is interesting precisely because when you see these descriptive results and answer the questions from the second step, you can actually keep digging really easily in your data. You can go back to what the people have been saying to the coded extract and look for more clues in just one click. Because it's in the coded extract, in what the people have been saying, that you will find explanations about why this topic seems to be more important or more relevant for some people than others. I'm going to show you one tool, an example in MaxQda. So here you can see that from the 9 interviews that have been talking about the topic health, 6 people were older than 21 and 3 were 21 or younger. So now if you click on the number 3, you can actually see here in that window the extracts, the coded extracts, so what they have been saying about this topic. And in this window here, if you click on an extract on the link, you can actually see that extract here in its context in the interview. So I really think that using a software like MaxQda makes it easier to navigate in your data and to go from step 2 to step 3 in the analysis process. And I mean, that's the main point of coding your data. That's why we do code data. Because if you just want to know how often they talk about a topic, you can just count the words, check how many times there are words related to a topic. And for that, you don't really need MaxQda. I mean, you can use MaxQda, but it can do much more than that. But now if you code your data, and if you are able to have a look at what the people have been saying, then you can try to understand why a topic is more relevant or important for some people, and how a situation works. And you can actually understand better the answers to the questions from step 3. I want to give you another example. Even before coding in MaxQda, you can dig deeper in your qualitative data this way. For example, I can get a word cloud. And here in that word cloud, in one click, I can have a list and see which words are the more used in my interviews. And I can choose one of these words, and just by clicking on it, I can see every time it's been used in its context in the interview. So, and I can try to understand better why this is an important word and seems to be an important topic in my data. So in conclusion, this is why it's important to have good and rich qualitative data to address the how and why questions from step 3, to have people talk about their experience. It helps to understand what the descriptive analysis from step 2 is showing you. So both tools and data are important to do good research. Tools, data, and your research questions, of course. So this is the end of this introduction to thematic analysis. If you want to learn more about thematic analysis, there are a few references below in the video description. We've seen that MaxQda is offering a lot of useful tools for thematic analysis, for the different stages of thematic analysis. If you want to find out more about how to use this tool, if you want to go further with MaxQda, as I was saying at the beginning, there is also a free introductive video to MaxQda on my website, a YouTube channel, and a training platform. And I also offer more comprehensive training, workshops, consulting for projects and teams, and there is also a complete MaxQda course that is entirely online. It's a 12 to 15 hour course, which is online 24/7, so you can do it at your own pace. And it really covers all of the features and tools of the standard version of MaxQda. And the goal is that by the end of the course, you will be able to import all kinds of data into MaxQda, to use all the analysis tools available, to adapt them to your projects, of course, and to produce visualizations and reports to present your research results. So if you would like to know more, you can check out my website, or you can reach out and send me an email. Thanks for watching, and all the best with your research projects.